Tonight, the subject of an ICAC investigation outed as the Anti-Police Commissioner is revealed as the person at the centre of an anti-corruption probe. Good evening, I'm Kyle Dowling. This is ABC News, Northern Territory. Also tonight, bracing for impact, communities along the east coast prepare as tropical cyclone Alfred edges closer. The US President issues a final warning to Hamas to release all hostages from Gaza. And the school bus battle breaking out in Katherine as parents speak out about safety concerns. The Northern Territory's Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy, has outed himself as the subject of an anti-corruption probe. The Independent Commissioner Against Corruption published a report late last month making findings against an unnamed senior public officer. The report stated that senior officer had engaged in improper conduct and had mismanaged a conflict of interest. Olivana Lathouris joins us live from outside Parliament House. Ollie, what's led to this bombshell admission?
Well, Kyle, there's been plenty of speculation simmering over the last few days, and as you mentioned, that really began when the ICAC published a report which found that a senior executive had helped a good friend get a high-powered job in the public service. Now, we now know that appointment to be the Assistant Commissioner, Peter Kennan, a close and long-term friend of the Police Commissioner, Michael Murphy. Now, the ABC isn't suggesting any wrongdoing on behalf of Mr Kennan. However, the ICAC did find that Mr Murphy's conduct was negligent, incompetent and improper in relation to that hiring process. Now, up until now, Mr Murphy has remained anonymous due to some constraints under Northern Territory legislation. Despite that, though, he has come forward. In his statement, he said it's his job to ensure trust in the Northern Territory Police Force and also accepted that he should have handled that conflict of interest better. He did, however, defend that appointment of Mr Kennan. He said it was based on merit and that it's just one of many appointments he's been involved in during his time as the Police Commissioner.
And so, Ollie, what happens now then?
Well, Kyle, that really remains to be seen. The Northern Territory Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, has been under significant pressure this week to reveal what she knew about that ICAC investigation. She didn't reveal Mr Murphy's identity. However, she has indicated that there won't be any disciplinary action taken. The Northern Territory Police Association has called an urgent meeting tonight, and we are expecting a statement from them a little later on tonight or tomorrow. Kyle?
Thanks, Ollie. Cyclone Alfred has slowed its pace, but not its punch. The tropical storm is now expected to cross the southeast Queensland coast early on Saturday. Its force is already well and truly being felt, with huge waves pummelling the Gold Coast and anyone risking going into the ocean or even onto the beach. Brisbane streets were eerily quiet today as residents prepared for Alfred's arrival. Across the border, emergency evacuation warnings have been issued for the northern rivers as the storm approaches. From Brisbane, reporter Mark Willisey begins our coverage.
The Category 2 system may have slowed, but Cyclone Alfred is not losing its punch. Surging surf on the Gold Coast, wiping out anyone reckless enough to put themselves or their cars in their path. Record-breaking waves have already been clocked, one over 12 metres high.
Oh, no way!
The already slow-moving system doubled back momentarily last night, delaying its arrival.
What we've seen overnight in terms of the erratic movement of the system reiterates the fact that this is an evolving situation.
It's now forecast to cross Queensland's coast as late as Saturday morning. Coastal islands like Stradbroke and Moreton will be hit first, and they're already feeling Alfred's long reach.
The wind has intensified. We've had gusts over the last sort of 24 hours, but now it feels really constant.
Brisbane was calm this morning, with plenty of people making the most of the unexpected fine weather.
Well, I did my last walk yesterday thinking this was not going to be available. Yeah, so it was a surprise this morning when you saw blue sky.
Feels like Christmas. There's not many people on the roads, but the weather's perfect, so.
The CBD was a ghost town. as many followed the advice to stay home.
It just seems to be taking so long to get here.
All you're hearing is Alfred, Alfred, Alfred. It's kind of like COVID, and you just kind of want it to move on and we can deal with it.
Airports made the call to close, the last flights in or out this afternoon, ahead of expected strong winds and intense rain.
This is significant rainfall that won't only cause flash flooding in the areas that, of the most impacted areas, but prolonged riverine flooding, and it's important that we are now preparing.
On the shores of Moreton Bay, hundreds of homes are at serious risk of inundation.
This place, when it gets heavy rain, it's come in before, so we're expecting it to be even worse.
We are going to cop it. It's just a matter of how bad.
The wind is really starting to pick up now at Brisbane's Moreton Bay, and if we swing around here, you can see that just 30 metres from the shoreline is a facility housing this community's most vulnerable. There are 80 nursing home residents there, and speaking to the people who run this facility, they say at this stage there is no plan to evacuate the residents. Health authorities insist it's not predicted to flood and is safe for both patients and staff.
Wherever possible, you don't want to move elderly people wherever it's safe to do so. So often it's a case of, can we get them to a higher level? Are we able to have power in place in case there's vulnerabilities with some of their generation at flood levels?
Late this afternoon, conditions took a turn. Just the beginning of what Cyclone Alfred will bring. Mark Willisey, ABC News, Brisbane.
For many residents in northern New South Wales, this could be their third major flood in just 8 years. Many are making their final preparations in a bid to avoid losing their homes and businesses all over again.
They're all completely drilled to the wall.
Murwillumbah resident Sarah Robertson is used to preparing for disaster.
Building everything in, that's the trick, because anything that's light enough to float, it will.
Mud still clings to the ceiling of her garage 3 years after flood waters swept through her property.
You can still see the mud on the floorboards.
She spent the day moving her valuables into this nearby motel.
This is, I think, our 5th or 6th flood evacuation visit.
But knowing what to expect hasn't made it any easier.
Our children have only known floods. Riley's, he just turned 11 on Tuesday, and we've been having floods for 10 years now. So, it's been his whole life. So it's terrible that they get used to disaster.
Cane farmer Robert Quirk is all too aware of the damage Mother Nature can cause.
You can probably see the water starting to pour into the farm.
Heavy flooding in 2022 nearly ruined his crops.
Well over $100,000. We were lost income. Oh, it's not good. There's some people who really struggle to come out of this.
As flood warnings came through, many fled to higher ground. Tubbulgum's centre virtually a ghost town as residents hunkered down.
It's been a slow burn. We've had many days warning and we don't know how high the river's going to go.
The Northern Rivers is known for its resilience, but as it prepares for its third potential major flood in just 8 years, some are questioning the future of building in the region altogether.
Because we're concerned that you can't put other people at risk, or you can't keep filling up the floodplain because it's cheap to develop and easy.
A sleepless night ahead for a region that's been through it all before. Victoria Pingilly, ABC News, Murwillumbah.
And we have reporters standing by in Queensland and New South Wales. Laura Lavelle in Brisbane, to you first. The city is watching the system closely. How is the situation looking there?
Well, Kyle, it's looking very different to what we expected. We thought at this stage we'd be talking about a tropical cyclone a few mere hours away from making impact, but the system stalled. And instead, as you can see behind me here, we've got some grey, overcast skies. The rain has been off and on again, but fairly light throughout the day. And the winds are just starting to really pick up here at the moment too. A different story on the Gold Coast. However, they're really bearing the brunt of those conditions at the moment. But But here in Brisbane, where I am, you'd never really guess that there was a cyclone brewing just off the coast. But that doesn't mean that people are becoming complacent. Residents have spent the day making sure they are prepared. They're gearing up to bunker down, feeling nervous and a little bit anxious as well, but ready to weather whatever comes their way.
And let's bring in reporter Sean Tarek Goodwin in Ballina in northern New South Wales. Sean, how's the situation looking there?
Well, the winds are already very strong here on the coast. There are warnings this evening of wind gusts of over 130 kilometres an hour. Here in Ballina, that's already been strong enough to bring down power lines. This town is one of the communities that's been issued an order to prepare to evacuate, which covers all of the CBD, which is flanked by the Richmond River. Authorities are concerned that the amount of water that will be flowing through that system out to sea could be met by a storm surge pushing more water inland, leaving communities like Ballina caught in the middle. The State Emergency Service has set up evacuation centres and it's urging people to consider relocating and not waiting around to find out what the impact will be.
Sean in Ballina and Laura in Brisbane, thank you both. Tropical cyclone Alfred is bringing a multitude of severe weather across several days, and here's what people along the east coast can expect.
Alfred's slow and erratic path has major implications. It shifted the intensity and duration of the impacts, including an extended period of flooding rain, which should persist for at least another 48 hours. The late arrival is partly explained by an irregular path on Wednesday. The steady track west was interrupted by a 12-hour loop. The movement west recommenced today and the eye is currently around 200 kilometres offshore. Although the wide field of gales and cloud means the coast is already being lashed by severe weather. The latest modelling shows Alfred crossing the coast around midnight tomorrow. However, the destructive core will start to impact the coast on Friday, remembering it's the southern side of the system which is the most dangerous. Coastal erosion will continue, the largest waves from Coffs Harbour to Cape Morton. But the most extreme weather for many regions will be rain. The greatest intensity now arriving late Friday and Saturday, when 6-hour totals will peak at 250 millimetres and 24-hour totals 450 millimetres. This represents life-threatening totals and is certain to cause severe flash and river flooding. Friday's rain should be the heaviest from the Gold Coast to about Port Macquarie in the moist easterly winds to Alfred South. Following landfall on Saturday, winds and surf should start to ease. However, rain will still be increasing in many areas this weekend, even well after Alfred is downgraded to a tropical low. 24-hour totals on both Saturday and Sunday will again peak near 400 millimetres, further exacerbating river levels over already flooded catchments.
Cyclone Alfred is upending the Prime Minister's election plans. Anthony Albanese hasn't ruled out calling the poll this weekend, but insists his focus is solely on the cyclone and its aftermath. Here's National Affairs correspondent Jane Norman.
From Queensland,
please be prepared, please stay informed,
to Canberra.
We're now anticipating a later crossing.
The Prime Minister's putting his disaster credentials on show.
We are there to support you. We have your back.
The states are responsible for responding to natural disasters, but Anthony Albanese is all too aware of the fierce backlash federal governments can cop for being too slow to act. With an election looming, this disaster has an added political dimension.
There are no political parties in this process and there are no borders.
Council recovery funds have been approved even before the cyclones made landfall. Hundreds of thousands of sandbags have been delivered and choppers pre-positioned, while dozens of defence personnel are going door to door to identify at-risk people.
The Australian Defence Force will be there and every capability that we can bring to bear.
The Prime Minister has cancelled a trip to Perth this weekend where he was planning to celebrate a likely Labor win in the state election before calling the federal election for April 12. It's long been his preferred date, but he has to call it by Monday. If he misses that window, he could be forced to hand down a budget and go to the polls in May. With the cyclone heading towards his own Brisbane electorate, Peter Dutton has argued now's not the time to call it.
I think it's really the occasion for the Prime Minister to be governing, not campaigning.
But those comments have raised eyebrows because the night before, he was nowhere near Brisbane. As revealed in the Australian Financial Review, the opposition leader had flown to Sydney for an event followed by a political fundraiser at the harbourside mansion of billionaire Justin Hems.
That'd be disappointing if it's true. I'm not sure if it is. I think that's for Peter Dutton to explain.
Privately, some Liberals think so too. Jane Norman, ABC News, Canberra.
The AFL has announced the dates of the rescheduled opening round matches in Queensland that were postponed because of the cyclone. The match between Brisbane and Geelong will be played at the Gabba in round 3 when both teams were scheduled to have a bye. The match between the Gold Coast Suns and Essendon will be played after the final round 24 matches. It means the two clubs will be one game behind the other 16 teams for most of the season. More on the cyclone coming up on 7:30 when Sarah Ferguson interviews the Defence Minister Richard Marles. Plus, hear the pitch from party leaders ahead of the WA election.
Only WA Labor will provide that experience and tested leadership.
We've got a government that's lost control.
Premier Roger Cook has illustrated he is completely out of his depth.
Three teenagers accused of attacking a 101-year-old man in Darwin have appeared in court. The trio are charged with aggravated robbery and deprivation of liberty after the elderly man, Ron Charles, was allegedly mugged by the group while in his mobility scooter on Tuesday night. Mr Charles, who suffered lacerations to his arm, was seen talking with the Northern Territory Chief Minister this morning in Darwin. 19-year-old Rakisha Foster appeared in the Darwin local court today, where she was remanded in custody ahead of a bail application later this month. Her two co-offenders, who cannot be named for legal reasons, appeared before the Youth Justice Court. Parent groups are calling for more supervision on school buses after the NT government put a $20 million tender process on ice in Katherine. The move comes in response to concerns about fighting and bullying during morning and afternoon drop-offs and could see the terms of the bus contract rewritten.
A school bus service that many parents in Katherine are reluctant to put their kids on.
It was pretty shocking when we heard in detail from a wide range of people how bad it could get.
Parent and School Council Chair Rob Chapman has been surveying local parents about the bus and collating their concerns.
Shouting, pushing, violence, damage to the bus, windows getting broken, kids watching pornography. There's a whole gamut of stuff which wouldn't be tolerated within a school or a workplace and has been known about for a long time.
The tender for Katherine's next school bus contract, worth up to $20 million, has now been put on hold, as concerned parents call for new safety measures to be included in the deal.
I've spoken to the Minister Yan about the bus contract, the tender that's gone out recently. That has actually been paused, and the Minister is looking into that contract, and he's also looking into the concerns that have been raised by community.
NT school buses are governed by a code of conduct that does allow principals to request a second adult, besides the bus driver, to be on board, but only in special circumstances and with a written justification. The body that represents public schools territory-wide says that's not good enough and is pushing for changes that will increase supervision. When the contract will go ahead and if a second adult will be required is still up in the air.
I'm not sure how long that pause on the tender will be, but I know that all of the concerns will be looked into.
An uncertain timetable for a vital service. James Elton, ABC News, Katherine.
French President Emmanuel Macron has warned that Europe is at a turning point in history as fears grow about the future of Ukraine. It comes as EU leaders prepare for emergency talks. Europe correspondent Zoe Ford reports from Brussels.
A powerful message unfurled in Belgium's capital. Protesters calling for the seizure of frozen Russian assets to bolster Ukraine, as EU leaders prepare for an extraordinary summit in the face of Moscow's aggression.
La menace revient à l'est.
The threat is returning to the east, and the innocence of the last 30 years since the fall of the Berlin Wall is now over.
The French president is standing firmly with Kyiv and warning of a new era for Europe.
Que la Russie d'aujourd'hui s'arrêtera.
Who can believe that the Russia of today will stop at Ukraine? Russia has become a threat to France and Europe.
After last week's fiery Oval Office clash, the United States is now suspending intelligence sharing with Ukraine, on top of halting much-needed military assistance.
We have taken a step back and are pausing and reviewing all aspects of this relationship.
But with negotiations on a minerals deal and a potential peace agreement seemingly moving forward, the Ukrainian president is optimistic.
Everyone can see how quickly diplomatic events are unfolding.
When EU leaders meet here in Brussels, they'll try to work out how to quickly ramp up defence spending to support Ukraine and protect the continent. But not all 27 members are likely to agree. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban is pro-Trump and friendly with Russia and may refuse to sign a joint declaration backing Kyiv. He wants direct talks with Moscow. All as Russian missile attacks continue on civilians in Ukrainian cities. And funerals are held for soldiers killed on the front line. Another hero honoured as his country fights to survive. Mazoe Ford, ABC News.
The US president has warned Hamas of hell to pay if it doesn't release all remaining hostages in Gaza. It came after the White House revealed it had dispatched an envoy for talks with the Palestinian militant group. In doing so, the US has broken a decades-old policy of not negotiating with groups that it brands as terrorist organisations.
A new military chief with the same message for the nation.
We will not forgive or forget. This is a war of survival. We will continue the campaign to return our hostages and achieve victory.
As he spoke, hundreds gathered at kibbutz near Oz, where Ohad Yahalomi, kidnapped nearly a year and a half ago, was laid to rest.
Since October the 7th, it seems the clouds of darkness have been creeping in and covering every good corner.
Ohad's body was returned from Gaza as part of the first phase of the ceasefire deal that has since expired. As negotiations stall over the future of the agreement, the US president issued what he called a final warning, calling Hamas sick and twisted and demanding they release the hostages now or there'll be hell to pay later. His comments coming amid reports the US had met the group in secret, breaking with long-standing protocol not to negotiate with terrorist organisations.
The special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter.
In the war-ravaged Gaza Strip, food security is worsening. The UN has called on Israel to lift its blockade on aid in line with international law.
And to allow and facilitate the safe, unconditional, massive and unhindered delivery of humanitarian aid at scale.
Hopes for recovery are short-lived as the future of the deal hangs in the balance. Eric Twarchek, ABC News.
To finance now, and Donald Trump's tariffs have led to a big fall in oil prices and the US greenback. And it was another bad day for the share market, which has now wiped out all of its gains since the start of the year. Here's David Chow.
Well, today was one of those rare days where the Aussie dollar actually did well. It's buying almost 63.5 US cents after rising by more than 1%. Now, it's not exactly because our economy has been exceptional lately, but because the US dollar has been tumbling. In fact, the greenback has wiped out all the gains it made since Donald Trump's first day in office and his election victory back in November. So the reality might be starting to sink in, which is that American consumers will actually be worse off, as trade wars will make things more expensive for them. And that's despite Donald Trump's claims that tariff is a beautiful word and a tax against other countries, which it actually isn't. And our friends in the US are certainly worried, judging from the surge in the number of people Googling the word recession, which may partly explain why the US president backtracked slightly on his trade war. He's now offering car makers like Ford and General Motors a 1-month exemption on the 25% tariff that is slapped on Mexico and Canada. So markets breathed a sigh of relief, with shares in the US and Asia recovering from their recent sell-offs. But no such luck here, as the All Ords is down 0.4%, while the ASX 200 did a little bit worse with its 0.6% fall. But when you zoom out, things look a little bit more grim. As you can see, the ASX has fallen quite sharply from its recent record high, and is even lower now than where it started the year. Now, the biggest drags on the market today were banks and miners, as well as the oil and gas giant Woodside, after the price of oil fell to its lowest level in 3 years, as Trump's trade war is expected to weigh quite heavily on oil demand. With any luck, it should hopefully lead to cheaper petrol prices here. And that's finance.
Dolphins coach Christian Wolff says he has no problem with his players who pulled out of tomorrow's NRL match with the Rabbitohs. The matchup with the club's former coach, Wayne Bennett, was moved from Brisbane's Lang Park to Western Sydney Stadium to avoid Cyclone Alfred.
He spent 2 years as Wayne Bennett's understudy. Now Christian Wolff is in charge of the Finns.
It was a great experience for me and something I've really enjoyed, and I've got a lot of respect for him, and I'm sure he feels the same way.
Supercoach Bennett defected to the struggling Rabbitohs for a second stint.
Just wants to start to play as a team and get our game together and make sure that we can be very competitive throughout the season.
His old team have been upended from Brisbane for round 1 to avoid Cyclone Alfred. But Cody Nikorima, Mark Nichols and Kenny Bromwich are staying with their families after Nikorima's pregnant wife Bree was furiously outspoken against the NRL.
They've got my full support, and so have those ladies. I understand their point of view, and I understand that some of their circumstances were a bit different.
In contrast, the AFL postponed their Queensland matches.
We understand here that there's bigger things at play, and football's very secondary this morning.
You know, our boys don't match up with Souths, and all those kinds of things just don't work. And the AFL were lucky, I suppose, in that they had 2 teams that had a bye a couple of weeks later, so they were able to make that work.
Bennett is also backing the NRL's move.
If we call it off, you find fault with us. If we put it on, you find fault with us. No, they've done the right thing.
The two sides will meet here tomorrow with Wayne Bennett preparing to face his old club. But it's the Roosters and Broncos who are the first to play post-Las Vegas with tonight's clash in Sydney. Bindi Bryce, ABC News.
New Zealand has booked a spot in the Champions Trophy final against India after beating South Africa by 50 runs in Lahore. Rising star Rachin Ravindra top scored with 108 and the former skipper Kane Williamson made 102 as the Black Caps posted a tournament record 6 for 362. In reply, South Africa was restricted to 9 for 312, with captain Mitch Stantner taking 3 wickets. New Zealand will be aiming to win the tournament for the first time in 25 years when it takes on India in Sunday's final in Dubai.
Going to chase like that. If you don't get these guys out, they're gonna chase anything. So I think it was obviously pleasing to get three pretty good scalps.
And out of the weather, and tonight's weather pick from Lake Alexander has been sent in by Megan Jones. There were isolated showers and thunderstorms in the western top end today. It was windy towards the south of the territory. Darwin reached 34 today, 36 at Warramayunga. Zooming out, Katherine a top of 39, 33 in Nhulunbuy and Borroloola 40. On top of 39 for Alice Springs, 38 in Yulara and Tennant Creek 42. On the satellite, tropical cyclone Alfred is continuing to bring cloud and rainfall over southeast Queensland and northeast New South Wales. Tropical cyclone Alfred is off the southeast Queensland coast. The system has slowed. It is expected to make landfall Friday night or early on Saturday. Interstate tomorrow, Hobart a top of 23 degrees, sunny in Melbourne, cloudy for Canberra, a shower or 2 in Sydney. For Brisbane, the cyclone has slowed, which could arrive late tomorrow or on Saturday, clear in Adelaide and a top of 31 at Perth. Looking at the territory for tomorrow, sunny and 38 in Alice Springs, Tennant Creek clear and 40 and Elliott a top of 41. Looking north, Katherine 38 with showers and a possible storm, partly cloudy in Borroloola, top of 33 in Nhulunbuy. And in the west, 35 at Batchelor and Darwin reaching 34 with a shower or 2 and possible storm tomorrow. There's a morning high tide at 11:26 and a low tide at 4:32 in the afternoon. The sun will rise tomorrow at 6:49 and will set just after 7 o'clock. And ahead in Darwin, showers and possible storms continuing and could become more likely from next week. And it's warming up a bit in Alice Springs, a bit of cloud sticking around from the weekend. And stay with us now. Sarah Ferguson is up next with 7:30. Good night.